Good evening. My name is Larry Temple. I'm chairman of the Lyndon Baines Johnson Foundation. And it's my distinct privilege on behalf of the trustees of the foundation, many of whom are here tonight, to welcome you to this occasion at the library. We're very proud of the fact that you picked this library for your meeting, and I hope you'll enjoy it. We think we have a treat at this library that you won't find at other presidential libraries. There are 13 presidential libraries in this country, and you can go to any of them and find a rich history of the period of that president. You can find truly great expert people that will tell you about the president of that library. We've got some of those here, and you'll hear from some of those people. But what we also have here is somebody that can tell you about Lyndon Johnson in a better, more complete way than anybody else, and that's Lyndon Johnson. I think as many of you may know, Lyndon Johnson confidentially, some people say secretly, recorded telephone conversations during the time of his presidency. And those telephone tapes are a big resource at this library. And you can hear the real Lyndon Johnson. You can hear him when he's funny. You can hear him when he's serious. You can hear him in poignant occasions. And you get the real Lyndon Johnson. Tom Johnson can tell you about him. Lucy Johnson will tell you about him. But Lyndon Johnson will tell you about him. And this exhibit that we're particularly proud of and completed about a year and a half ago incorporates about 90 of those telephone tapes. And you can pick by subject and you can pick by people, as you'll see as you go through. So if you want to talk about, hear about civil rights, you can hit a button and you hear him talking to Dr. Martin Luther King. Or if you want to pick Kay Graham, you can do that. I urge you to take advantage of this because we're enormously proud of that resource. And we're also proud of and grateful for the fact that you're here. And I have the pleasure of welcoming you. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Teresa Swartz, who will tell you the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're more than delighted to be here. As you may know, this evening's gathering and the conference tomorrow are the inaugural events of this anniversary year of the White House Fellows. We are this year 50 years old. The program, as you all know, was created by President Johnson and nurtured and fostered and helped in every way by Mrs. Johnson and President Johnson. The program was launched and has thrived. And I think the reason that it thrived is because President Johnson really assured that it was going to be bipartisan, nonpartisan, that highly skilled and talented young people would be selected for the program, and that it would be, and it was adopted by subsequent presidents, 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats. And so we are today, I think, very deeply indebted to President and Mrs. Johnson and the entire Johnson family. This year, and at this, I certainly cannot think of a better place to begin the celebration of this 50th anniversary year. And with us, we have members of the first class of fellows, represented by Tom Johnson, and we have a member of the current class of fellows. And we have fellows from every decade of those 50 years in attendance today. So this is going to be quite a celebration, and we are very pleased to be here and very grateful to be here. There are many people who have worked to make this event possible, and I'd like to begin by thanking the LBJ Foundation for hosting this evening. And we have very distinguished guests here from the foundation, and I'd like to recognize Lucy Johnson, who's here. Temple, who's the CEO of the president of the LBJ Foundation. Tom Johnson, I've already mentioned, trustee also of the foundation and member of the first class fellows. Probably the one person in the room that needs no introduction. With us also is Senator Rodney Ellis, who's trustee of the foundation. Ambassador Ron Kirk. Is he here?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. We'll look for and Amy Barbie, the executive director of the foundation. I'd also like to recognize some of our very distinguished guests. Admiral Bob Inman and his wife Nancy. Bob is going to be speaking tomorrow during the conference. And Dr. Jody Durham, who is superintendent of the Elgin Independent School District and will be on tomorrow's panel on education. And finally, distinguished guests, Professor Roger Lewis and his wife Dagmar. And I should mention we have a couple of very distinguished fellow guests as well. Henry Cisneros. And Doris Kearns. Excuse me. Doris Meisner. The other Doris. We have two of the best Dorises you will ever find. So tomorrow we have a very wonderful program, and we're very much looking forward to it. And I want to acknowledge David Moore, who has had this vision about coming to the LBJ Library and having this program on the 50th anniversary year. And he has done a marvelous job of putting this program together, so special thanks to David. This evening we're going to hear from Tom Johnson, who is going to speak to the overall theme of the conference, which is Reuniting America. And tomorrow, as I say, we have a full program of events. It is really a very, very special occasion. A lot of people have helped make this happen, and just on behalf of all of us, thank you for all the work and the very good program that we have to look forward to tomorrow. So with that, I would like to call on our fellow Walter Hooman. He is from the second class of White House Fellows, and he is going to do the invocation.
When President Johnson announced his retirement, I had the privilege of presenting to him a gold vermilion bowl, which was exhibited here in the library. And the comments that I made at that time was that now that you're returning to God's country, we wanted you to have this bowl. So since we are all now in God's country, bow your heads and we'll pray. Dear Heavenly Father, you, the one from whom on different paths all of us have come. You, the one to whom on different paths all of us are going. Make strong in our hearts what unites us. Build bridges across all that divides us by using the principles of love, respect, and dedication to one another and to our country. Bless this food to thy glory and our good. Amen.
Tom Johnson is someone who is known very much by all of the members of the Lyndon Baines Johnson Foundation trustees who are here with us tonight, and he is also very well known by all of the White House Fellows here with us tonight. And so I really just want to share with you on a personal level that over the past several months, as I've had the opportunity to work with Tom, what a joy and a pleasure it's been. And to tell you that he is a man who burns with enthusiasm. He is a man who absolutely brings his friends forward as his loudest trumpets on behalf of the cause that he is seeking. And he is someone who beguiles his adversaries with warmth, wit, and charm until they become his friends. And lastly, I would just like to echo Walt Human's words tonight from the invocation when he talked about the importance of love, respect, and dedication, because these are exactly the qualities that Tom Johnson has brought to us. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker.
David, thank you very much. And for those of you who have not heard, David is the new Executive Director of the White House Fellows Association and Foundation. Each year, we celebrate Independence Day and Veterans Day, two of our nation's most important holidays, with parades, with banners, with fireworks. We pay tribute to the brave women and men whose courage and whose sacrifices enable us to enjoy the freedoms and the independence that we so cherish today. Because of them, we became the United States of America. Because of them, we became one nation under God, with liberty and with justice for all. And because of them, and so many others over the years, we became a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Tonight, I urge especially this group that we recommit ourselves to the values and to the vision that are embodied in those words. We, as a nation, are no longer united. In fact, as you know so well, we are badly divided. Somehow, some way, we must do what we can to reunite America. Somehow, some way, we must try to join together in common purpose to deal with the critical issues that we confront during these times. Somehow, some way, we need to stop the politics of personal destruction that characterizes so much of our national political life. We need to realize that the issues we confront are not Republican issues or Democratic issues. They're not conservative issues or liberal issues. They are American issues. Many of them, such as the debate even now over an Iranian nuclear weapons agreement, the debate about what to do about the extraordinary dangers of ISIS, but even on this evening's television news, what to do about police shootings, about crime, and in this part of the world especially, about immigration. These debates threaten in many ways to continue to almost tear apart the fabric of our democracy. And of course, others, such as global warming, may jeopardize, in my view, the quality of life that our children, our grandchildren, and future generations of Americans will experience. This group, I think, knows best of all that we have shown that we can unite when our government and the public can work together. The historic Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 are just two examples. But these examples where Dr. King and President Johnson and other leaders worked together for those historic achievements. And I should say, work together even though the movie Selma misrepresented LBJ in that recent movie. But I just think at this stage in America's history, we need to restore a level of mutual respect and cooperation among our leaders at every level, in our cities, in our states, and especially in our nation's capital. I think we need to put aside, if we can, the bitter partisanship that has arisen in recent years. Even though I know, and I guess I'll be the first to say before Carl speaks tomorrow morning, we never will eliminate all of it, but respectful and vigorous debate always should be welcomed in this wonderful democracy. But most of the people I know, and I don't mean just in my state of Georgia, but most of the people I know are sick and tired of highly partisan, mean-spirited political practices of both national parties. Most of the people that I know want serious problems of this nation to be resolved by responsible leaders, leaders who will place the interests of the people ahead of narrow partisan interests. All the people I know want clean air for us to breathe, want pure, safe water to drink, and certainly want us to have safe foods to eat. All the people I know want safe neighborhoods in which to live, good schools for our children, and equal rights for all Americans. They want medical care for our sick, job opportunities for those who can and should work, affordable housing for those wanting a home, and peaceful, and I really mean peaceful, coexistence with the many diverse racial and ethnic groups in this country. They want a national immigration policy that enables us to fill extremely important jobs in dozens of industries: agriculture, construction, hotels, healthcare, to name just a few. And I think that most of the Democrats and the Republicans, the liberals and conservatives that I know, including those of you that I know well in this room, want us to have a very strong military, a very strong homeland security to protect us from ISIS and from other terrorists. They want us to find ways to work together. At other critical moments in this nation's history, we have come together to deal successfully with huge issues. America did it after we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. America did it after Hitler unleashed his evil forces of brutality and sought world domination. America did it during the 50 long years of the Cold War with the Soviet Union, years when nuclear weapons threatened to destroy this planet. America did it when we decided to place a man on the moon. And certainly America did it when we resolved to eliminate at least the formal elimination of racial segregation in America 50 years ago tonight. And since 9/11, we have been remarkably successful in our war on terrorism here at home. Two administrations, Bush 43 and Obama, have kept us safe. The massive Homeland Security Organization and our extraordinary military, especially our Special Operations Commands, have prevented another 9/11. Even so, there was the tragic terrorist bombing of the Boston Marathon 2 years ago. However, as we have seen, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are again very, very much on the move. We cannot win this war on terrorism alone. All of the countries that are threatened by ISIS and other radical extremist groups must fight this long-term battle together. Personally, I want every president of the United States to succeed in these battles. I do not want any president to fail, regardless of his or her party. If a president fails, we fail. If a president is successful, we as a nation, in so many ways, are successful. Each president is president of all of us. I worked for 8 years, along with Larry and others in this room, with President Johnson, 4 in the White House and 4 here in Texas. He told this story many times after he left office in 1969 when President Nixon and Vice President Agnew were in power. And I can almost quote literally. I did take good notes. Tom, America is like a fully loaded jumbo jet, a 747 with all of us aboard. The pilot of that plane now is Richard Nixon. His co-pilot is Spiro Agnew. If our plane makes it through the turbulence, through the storms, through the troubled skies, we all make it to a safe landing. But if that plane does not make it through, we all crash. The last thing a pilot, and I thought this quote was one that I'll never forget, the last thing a pilot or co-pilot needs is for the former pilot or former co-pilot to come into the cockpit hitting him in the head with a bat. I've thought a lot about that story when I read about the severe attacks on President Bush 43 for 8 years, and now President Obama for 7 years. It is one thing to attack the policies of a president. It is quite another to attack a president so personally. In the 4 years after President Johnson left office, not once did he criticize President Nixon in public. President Bush 43 also has not attacked President Obama in the years since he's been back in Texas. Despite serious political differences, Presidents Johnson and both Bushes, 41 and 43, knew when to place the national interest ahead of partisan conflicts. Remember President Bush 41, that quote, "Read my lips, no new taxes." Well, it became clear that our economy at the time required new revenues. George Herbert Walker Bush did what he thought was right for his nation. That decision and Ross Perot most likely cost him re-election. In my days in Washington in the 60s, old adversaries fought about the issues by day, had a drink or two together at night, and often worked out a compromise. As Larry knows probably better than I, during the 60s, President Johnson wanted to pass a very controversial piece of legislation. Senate Republican leader Everett Dirksen of Illinois held a press conference, I think it was on a Friday, to denounce the bill. I mean, absolutely denounce it. In response, President Johnson invited Senator Dirksen down to the White House for a private meeting. Reluctantly, Senator Dirksen came. They met in that small office just off the Oval Office, the one used for the most private presidential conversations. I was a note taker for that meeting. LBJ had a scotch or soda or two. Senator Dirksen consumed a bourbon or two. Dirksen explained his strong opposition to the bill. The meeting was interrupted when a young White House aide named Jim Jones brought in some documents. LBJ took the folder and showed the folder to Dirksen. He then said, "Ev, totally separate from this bill," it's a rough quote, "I want you to help me pass, totally separate from the bill I want you to help me pass. I need to let you know that my staff and the Veterans Administration are recommending that that big VA center that you want constructed in your district back in Illinois should actually be built in Austin, Texas. They say that Austin is more centrally located, that it is closer to where most of the veterans live, that it is much less expensive to build it in Texas than in Illinois." The meeting ended with LBJ badly needing Senator Dirksen's vote and Senator Dirksen badly wanting that Veterans Administrative Center built in Illinois. As I said earlier, the LBJ Dirksen meeting over drinks was on a Friday, as I recall. On the following Monday, Senator Dirksen called a press conference. In a big surprise, he announced that he was now for the bill. And he urged his fellow Republicans to support it as well. The press corps was astounded. One reporter asked, "Senator, how is it that you announced your opposition to this bill last Friday, and today you're reversing yourself and announcing that you support it?" In that wonderfully melodious voice, Senator Dirksen said to the press, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am a wiser man today than I was on Friday." Well, as you might have guessed, that bill passed, and a new Veterans Administration Center was built in Illinois. I should also tell you, one was also built in Austin. Truthfully. I think that was bipartisanship at its best. Horse trading at the highest levels, where both sides won. In my opinion, we need more of that today. Let's keep in mind when we visit the graves of our soldiers, our men and women who died in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in other battles. Let's all look very closely at those thousands and thousands of white crosses. There are no R's or D's on their headstones. No labels as to what their political party was. These young women and men, they died as Americans. I certainly do not envy what the next president of our country will confront. In 2016, I hope we will elect leaders of both parties who will be uniters, not dividers, men and women who will bring us closer together. But I, as I said, will be the first to admit I don't see that happening anytime soon. You'll hear more from Karl Rove on that tomorrow morning, and I am prepared to be called both naive and perhaps too idealistic. But I do think that attempting to unite America, to become more bipartisan, even on such a critical matter, especially on such a critical matter as the U.S.-Iran nuclear framework announced last Thursday, that will not be easy. That's going to be a very tough fight. But tonight, what I really would like to ask the White House fellows to do is to try yourselves to find more ways for us to work together in our communities, in our states. I so hope that we can discover some ways for us to have a political culture that is more based on civility, on mutual respect, on compromise, and when we can, on bipartisan cooperation. Most of us in this room as White House fellows have been blessed with opportunities and successes that are just unbelievable, almost remarkable. I look at somebody like Jim, who over 40 years worked his way up through the ranks to become the president of Ford Motor Company. I know stories about most of you in this room that I could mention. But we who've achieved so much need to give back. We need to give back more of our time, more of our attention. That's what Walt Human does almost every day in Dallas, Texas. And more effort to make our country stronger by trying to bring us together. When you think about how broad and how diverse our country is, can you imagine any group of more diverse thinkers and leaders than the White House fellows? We have had an opportunity. Now I think we have a responsibility to show people in just one small way, perhaps, in your community, in your organization, and whatever, to show people how it's possible to work together. And I know that many of you do that already. To work across the aisle, to work across the issues. I just guess I end by a plea, and that is that you become, if you aren't already, with the time we all have left, a uniter, not a divider. I think reuniting America is a cause that John Gardner and President Johnson would say is very worthy of us, worthy of our capabilities, and commensurate with our responsibilities. Thank you.
It is a side effect of an antidepressant that I take, and it is there's another one that I'm told that I can take that will keep me from perspiring, but I'm afraid it might lead to other more severe consequences, like erectile dysfunction.
I'm not sure I can top that. How about those Blue Devils? I would just like to ask Lucy Johnson, ma'am, if you would be so kind as to come forward and share a few thoughts with us to close our evening, we would be honored. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. You're going to hear more from me tomorrow than you probably would ever want to. But as I sat here and listened to Tom tonight, I couldn't help but be moved, as so many of you were. And I thought, as he was talking about the importance of uniting us all, that today is the 150th anniversary of Appomattox. When we once came as enemies against each other, Tom and I as sons and daughters of the South, against our northern neighbors, when our sense of what was right was called so much into question, and which was finally resolved on this momentous day, with open arms of inclusion and a commitment to come and reason together as fellow Americans. Come and reason together, as Tom knows well, and Larry too, and all of us who were graduates of the Johnson administration, was my father's favorite biblical quote from the book of Isaiah. It was what he was all about, because in the final analysis, his goal was the achievement for all of us, not the credit for any single individual. It means the world to me tonight to be able to welcome you all to the library that bears his name, and to toast his good friend and mine, Tom Johnson, who helped make sure that we were all here this evening. Lyndon Johnson had great dreams for the White House fellows. His hope was that the best and brightest of our country could come together and benefit from a year of practical experience at the highest levels of government, and go out and make a difference and change the world. But I suspect never in his wildest dreams did he think that one of those White House fellows would make all the difference for generations of Johnsons. Out of those 8,000 who first inquired about that first White House Fellows class. 15 were selected. And one of them, a Horatio Alger story, not dissimilar to Lyndon Johnson's own, was Tom Johnson. When I was growing up, my mother and father shared at our dinner table every night with my sister and myself the biblical admonition, to whom much is given, much more is expected. When you think of Tom Johnson, whose father died when he was very young, and who went to work when he was just 14 to support his mother and did every day for the rest of her life until she went to heaven. The idea of to whom much is given, much more is expected doesn't seem to really apply. After all, wealth was not at their doorstep in terms of what most of us think is wealth. But Tom Johnson and Lyndon Johnson had different ideas about what wealth really is. And Tom had that wealth of intellect, that wealth of ambition, that wealth of desire to give back to others as he had been given to. And he became the son that Lyndon Johnson never had. The brother that Lucy and Linda never had. And when you ask what he really meant to our family, I think it can be summed up best when my father died January 22nd, 1973. His death was announced by that young man who had first come as a White House fellow to serve in the Johnson administration, ultimately as an assistant to my father's press secretary, and then to my father himself. He stood there as the head of my father's staff in retirement and announced his death, and was chosen by my mother, my sister, and myself to escort my mother throughout the funeral. Several years ago, and actually it's about 4 now, I was in this community in a nearby hospital, suffering with a disease that left me paralyzed, and my husband and children and sister as well. Would I recover? Could I recover? How would I recover? Remained in question. And I looked around and I saw them all, and I found great comfort. And then on the other side of the room, I knew all would be well, because there was Tom. He was a great man to have in a crisis for Lyndon Johnson. He was a great man to have in a crisis for Lady Bird Johnson. He was a great man to have in a crisis for Lucy and generations of Johnsons that remain. And how did he come to this opportunity simply because he believed in that biblical admonition that Daddy shared at our table was his as well. To whom much is given, much more is expected. He stands in front of you tonight as your fellow alum, asking all of you to march in a mighty parade, to say the best and the brightest are coming again to the forefront of our nation's conscience, to say enough. Let's come, let's reason together. Let's make a difference, because we can, we should, we must. He is, in my mind, your pride and joy, as he is, without a doubt, the pride and joy of generations. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to join me in proposing, yes, our toast to our favorite White House. But more importantly, to all the White House fellows that he and Lyndon Johnson believed in so much. If my father was here, and I can guarantee you I will not put words in his mouth in his death, as I dare not in his life. But it would be his desire to exercise every ounce of guilt he possibly can on all of you. To remember that you are America's best and brightest. You came and gave your youth for our country. You stand the best chance of all on this anniversary of Appomattox to help us come once more and reason together. And so, as Lyndon Johnson's daughter, it is my pride and joy to toast the White House fellows and the best amongst them.